this quarter. But before we get there, let us talk a little bit about how God has blessed us this week. So is there anybody who wants to share a praise report on how God has been good for you, how God has just kept you this week? Go ahead. All right. Sister Janine Walker, go ahead and tell us, how has God been good to you this week?
Happy Sabbath, everyone. Well, I'm just grateful that I just came back from mission trip Atlanta, Kenya to Turkey 2022. It was words can't describe the entire experience, but getting to see the children and different cultures and meeting new people was awesome. So I want to thank the entire mission trip leadership team. They did an extraordinary job, and I just felt like I was on vacation, but the work was good. We completed the mission. So we have VBS, and we were able to build 2 classrooms for these children, for rescue for girls. So it was an extraordinary time, and I'm glad to be back in the United States. But and I'm not jet lagged, so I feel great today. So I'm just glad that we all came back, all healthy, and God gave us grace for traveling mercies. Happy Sabbath. I missed you all.
Oh, praise God. You know, that's what mission's about. It's not supposed to feel like work. It feels like a vacation. You're giving of yourself in service and help of others. And I don't know if you got to check out her pictures. They're beautiful. Seeing just how happy people are, I think is wonderful. Before Sherelle goes, I just want to just say here in the chat that Rowan said that we've been praying for toddler Tyson, who was diagnosed with a neuroblastoma, and they tested him and there's no trace of cancer. So praise God. And she thanks you for your prayers. And I love Sherelle's comment. Praise the Lord. Won't he do it? And yes, he will. He is in the business of miracles still. Go ahead, Sherelle. Tell us how God has been blessed you this week.
So I do want to say I'm thankful that my friends, including you, were able to go on mission trips and come back safely. But for me this week, I had a trying last weekend, like going into this week. And I, on the set for praise team today, the song, Lord, You Are Good, like I've been practicing, and it's been taking me out, like just remembering, regardless of what trials I may be going through, what struggles I may have, that God has been more than good to me. So I've been thankful for the set this week. I'm always thankful to have another day of life, but just remembering that regardless of what I'm going through, it's a blessing for me to be here. And it's a blessing that God will still remain good to me, even though I don't deserve it.
Yes, I love that, because sometimes we get so caught up in what's going on, and the fact, just like you said, to have this set of music. Well, first of all, you have a gift of song and of singing and of praising the Lord in a beautiful fashion. People like myself can't sing. So, and if I would, it would not be beautiful. But the fact that you're able to just share your gift and to be able to just praise the Lord, and it's amazing. So, and it definitely, like you said, it just sings to your soul. So thank you so much for sharing. Is there anyone else that wants to just say how well God has blessed them? Anybody else that wants to share before we get started? Nope. All righty. Well, like I said, this is the last week of Genesis. And if you've been with us this whole quarter, this whole 13 weeks, we've gone from Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, to Noah, to Abraham, to Isaac and Rebecca, to Jacob and Esau, to Joseph's trial. And now we are at the last week, the last chapters of Genesis. But before we get there, the one question I have is, how do you know that God is leading you in your life? Because when we look at all these characters throughout Genesis, God was leading them for a purpose and for a reason and for a plan. But I'm sure going through it, they were just like, it's hard. This is difficult. So how do you know that God is leading you in your life? What are some signs? What is something that you see that kind of shows you that God is there and that God is leading you? Any thoughts on that? And no, I decided not to do an easy softball question. I figure you guys are 13 weeks. You can handle the hard questions. How do you know? How do you know? Or do you know? It's okay. Sometimes I don't know God's leading me, but then it works out. Go ahead, Charmaine.
Well, he said by his word that he'll never leave us and he'll never forsake us. So that's one way that I know. And then just having a relationship with him. And so there's two parts to this, because there's sometimes when I think he's leading me and I'm leading myself, right? Mm-hmm. And so for me to know that he's leading me, I have to go back to him and ask him for direction, because he said, if you come to me, I will direct you. If you cry out to me, I will deliver you, right? And he communicates with all of us in various ways. So if we're really, really paying attention, and if we're really, really intentional, he said, seek, right? And we'll find. So he'll show us, and he tells us in his word that he will show us our ways and he will direct our path.
I love that. I love it. Seek and you shall find, and show us our ways and he will direct your path. Thank you, Charmaine. Janine, how do you know that God is leading you in your life?
Well, thank you for that very hardball question this morning.
So, I knew you could do it.
I don't know if I'll have a real answer, but I feel like for me, when they line up, when I get confirmation over and over again, and then when things are easy, and then sometimes things could be difficult, but things still line up and I have no control over it, but it's all moving in this direction. So I don't think I answered your question, but that's how it is for me. I feel like there's a confirmation and it's not difficult.
Okay. Confirmation and it's not difficult. And I would say for me too, sometimes it's like I feel a relief. Like I don't feel conflicted in my soul. I don't have chest pain. I don't feel like, oh, my stomach's in knots. All right, Ernest, how do you know that God is leading you in your life?
You have to listen, and sometimes he speaks through divine providence, opening doors, and if you've been praying and dwelling with something that you would hope God would answer or do, usually it's just when I'm about to give up, that something will show up where it speaks directly to me, or a situation will just open up that I know that had to be God.
Like that. I like that. Just not only opening up, but it happens. Go ahead, Maurice.
Happy Sabbath. One of the things that kind of in line with what Ernest is saying and Janine's saying about just sometimes that affirmation through others. Somebody will come up to you and say, hey, I had a dream, or they'll literally say, I see what you're doing, or I get what it is. I was blessed by what you said or what you're doing, or what you've done, or I was witnessing you, observing you. So sometimes the affirmation comes, God uses others who, even though we don't think we're watching, they actually see God doing something in you and through you.
I love that. Thank you so much, Maurice. So I like Karen, what she also said in the chat. She said, for her, direct answers to my prayer for guidance helps me know that God is guiding me and leading me in my life. Now, we're going to turn back to the story of Joseph. Now, where we left off last week, Joseph had showed himself to his brothers. There was a lot of crying, a lot of weeping, but it just seemed like there was years of anxiety and stress of holding the secret that his brother didn't die, that they sold him away, that it just helped to kind of just relieve the soul that finally it's out and God has blessed it. So let us turn into our Bibles, Genesis 45, 16 through 24. Can somebody read that for me? That is Genesis 45, 16 through 24. Again, Genesis 45, 16 through 24. Does anybody have that?
I can go ahead and read it. Genesis 45, starting at verse 16 through 24. When the news reached Pharaoh's palace that Joseph's brothers had come, Pharaoh and all his officials were pleased. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Tell your brothers, do this: load your animals and return to the land of Canaan, and bring your father and your families back to me. I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you can enjoy the fat of the land." You are also directed to tell them, "Do this: take some carts from Egypt for your children and your wives, and get your father and come. Never mind about your belongings, because the best of all Egypt will be yours." So the sons of Israel did this. Joseph gave them carts, as Pharaoh had commanded, and he also gave them provisions for their journey. To each of them he gave new clothing, but to Benjamin he gave 300 shekels of silver and 5 sets of clothes. And this is what he sent to his father: 10 donkeys loaded with the best things of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain and bread and other provisions for his journey. In verse 24, then he sent his brothers away, and as they were leaving, he said to them, "Don't quarrel on the way."
So it worked out. I mean, Pharaoh was like, everybody was pleased. They're like, "Yes, I'm so glad you found your family." But why do you feel like, one could say that favoritism from Jacob actually started kind of all of this, was the beginning stages where it's seeded in jealousy, and the brothers were jealous of Joseph with having that coat of many colors. And so now, fast forward several years, Joseph is like, "Not only, Benjamin, I'm giving you some more money, I'm going to give you 5 sets of clothing." Why do you think Joseph gave Benjamin more than his brothers? Do you think he was even thinking about the favoritism, or was it just ingrained? What do you think? Do you think that Joseph was just, okay, go ahead, Charmaine.
So it wasn't favoritism. It was to see if they were still the same persons, if they were cruel, and if they were going to mistreat Benjamin the way they mistreated him. So basically, it was a test of their character.
So it was more of a test. Okay. And Sherelle says it was his right to do it, his right to give more to his physically brother than the rest of them. Do you think, even though it was a test, do you think he was trying to start a little bit of animosity? Because at the end he was like, "Well, don't quarrel on the way home." Like, what do you think, Ernest?
I think also it could be just a certain specific closeness he had to Benjamin. Benjamin was the next in line, the youngster that he had not seen in a long time. And Benjamin was probably just a kid when Joseph was trafficked. I was going to say left, but when Joseph was trafficked out and made a slave in Egypt, Joseph was just a little boy. Benjamin was just a little boy. So, probably just some of that family bonding. And in big families, sometimes you develop small cliques.
Okay. That may be the case. I only have me and my brother, so we only had the 2 of us. But I guess in earnest, having a big family, you can be a little bit closer to one of your siblings than the other. So, okay, I get that. I thought it was very interesting that he said, okay, go ahead, Maurice. What were your thoughts?
I'm that big cousin. So remember, they're way older than him. So sometimes when you see a younger relative or younger cousin or brother, even though blood, and I agree that probably because he was his blood brother, that also made that tie, that uniqueness. But then sometimes we see a younger relative, you tend to dote on them more because it's just like you remember your upbringing and your childhood, just being nice, being kind, because we have older brothers, and he's the youngest of them all, so he kind of like he's the run to the litter, and so you kind of love on him and give him a little bit extra. Sometimes I feel like that's what we do. I know in my family, other people, I've seen people do that to the younger of our family.
That's a good point, because I was telling Ernest before we started, I was like, I found it very interesting that they referred to Benjamin as the lad, but then in the verse ahead of this, he had like 10 sons. So this man was old. He had like 10 kids, but he was still the lad. So it's like you never grow up. Go ahead, Sherelle.
So compared to what Marie said, everyone has a favorite. And I feel at this point, Joseph has gone through the ringer. And you can dote on your favorite little brother. It's fine. Like, I have favorite cousins, and I do give more to them than I do my other cousins. For my siblings, I do have some that I do have favorites, and I do more for them. I mean, it's just what it is. And at this point, y'all should say something. Say something to my brother Benjamin, because y'all not coming up here. If I was Joseph, y'all not coming back. Y'all staying down there and bring my father and Benjamin up here. Like, that's it.
I love it. I love it. And then Kevin says in the chat, Benjamin had no hand in what his older brothers did. True. Yeah, he didn't actually do it. And then Ernest says, I've got cousins whose name include little as a kid. They're now 50 and still little, which is funny. So it's funny, the family dynamics. It's like you never really grow up. The funny thing is that when Joseph was saying, don't quarrel on the way, when I first read this, I actually was thinking, like, was he talking about the brothers maybe quarreling or having a really heated argument about how they're going to tell their father that their little brother is actually still alive and we actually sold him and didn't kill him? Like, I was wondering if that was the case, but I don't know. But all right, let's move on and read verses 25 to 28, and I'll read in your hearing. And it says, so they went up to Egypt and came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. And they told him, Joseph is alive. In fact, he is the ruler of all of Egypt. And Jacob was stunned. He did not believe them. But when they told him everything Joseph had said to them, when he saw the carts Joseph had sent to carry him back, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. And Israel said, I am convinced my son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die. Now, I actually totally understand why Jacob didn't actually believe his children when they told him that Joseph was alive. I mean, his sons had a lot of drama. Like, I mean, how many times did his heart faint when he heard that, oh, my son's killed an entire town, or, oh, my son slept with my concubine, or, oh, Joseph is killed. Like, I can understand that you probably are in that moment where, like, I don't know when the next shoe is going to drop. But the one thing that Patriarchs and Prophets, page 232 says is, like, this was another act of humiliation that remained for the 10 brothers. They actually now confessed to their father the deceit and cruelty that for so many years had embittered his life and theirs. Jacob had not suspected them of such a base a sin, but he saw that all had been overruled for good, and he forgave and blessed his erring children. In your life, we will have times where we have to tell people difficult things that are life-changing. How do you approach that? A good example is, as a physician, I sometimes have to tell somebody that their loved one has passed away. And it's always very difficult for me to do that. But how have you had to tell somebody life-changing information that you know is going to change? And how do you approach that? How do you deal with that? Any thoughts? Go ahead, Ernest.
I'll jump in and say, try to be gentle and understanding. It's easier to say that than it is to do it. And I find myself trying to paint the picture with as much logic as I can, or analogies. Because what you got to think here is Joseph had believed a lie for 20 years or so. And, some of us are living the same way. And it's like, it's hard to pull somebody, including yourself, out of that.
That's so true. So 20 years they had to watch their father grieve, knowing that, oh, he may not be dead, but, trying to believe the lie that they told him, which is actually really hard for them too. So I'm sure there was some type of sense of relief that, hey, it worked out. But in other cases, it may not. So yeah, that was probably a really difficult conversation. Any other thoughts about this particular passage? I would say the one. Oh, go ahead.
I have to wonder if it's almost like the pot calling the kettle black type thing. Like when his sons are talking to him about what they have done, did he like flash back to what he did to his brother, what his father had done? Like, did he go back through the history of their family and was like, the decisions I have made may have caused my children to be privy to this type of foolery that they were involved in. So he took some personal responsibility. I know I do that sometimes with my children, based on what they do that's negative. And I know, oh, you got that from me. So I may be a little more lenient, but of course I'm going to scold, but it's not as hard as something that I didn't do myself previously. So maybe that's what, like, some of those thoughts are going through his mind.
That's a good point. That's a good point because he, Jacob did some stuff. He did some stuff. So, and I think probably, there's probably 10 times fold, basically, his kids on what they did to him. So I agree. That's a good point. That's a really good point. The one thing that came to me is that Jacob seemed real easy. I mean, really, it seems like really quickly they wanted to move, like he was ready to go to Egypt. Like, I mean, God had given them this promise that they're going to be in Canaan, but he seemed really easy, quickly to go to Egypt, when Joseph had called. If we look at verse 46:1, it says, so Israel set out with all that was his. And when he reached Beersheba, he offered sacrifices to God of his father Isaac. And in Patriarchs and Prophet, it says, Jacob offered grateful sacrifices and entreated the Lord to grant them an assurance that he would go with them. Now, like I said, this whole time, the Lord had said, I will make you a great nation in Canaan. So moving to Egypt was actually a major, like a major step. When we are making big steps in our lives, is it wise to kind of act, then ask the Lord if he'll go with us? Because it seems that's kind of what he did in these passages. Now, mind you, we don't know everything, but it seemed like he was like, okay, I will go, and then let me go and offer sacrifices and see if this is God's will. What do you think about that? Am I just reading too much into it?
I like that question because I think I'm trying to say this in as reverent a way as I can, but God doesn't always speak on stuff. Like I don't recall, maybe I did and missed it, but I don't recall receiving a word from God saying that I needed to join Sabbath School this morning. There's sometimes we do have to move forward with the best wisdom God has given us. And I think a lot of times he's trying to develop our sensibility of wisdom and judgment and some of our own discernment as well, so that we may not need to hear explicitly, but all the wisdom that we've built up from reading his word.
I like that, Ernest. So it's okay to make decisions, but based on what we have been able to learn by reading God's word and actually spending time with him, we know that this is what he wants. Okay, I like that, because that was going to be my next question for you, Ernest. It's like, how do you know? How do you know this is right? And I guess the question is, you just don't, right? Or the answer is you just don't. Go ahead, Karen.
I totally agree with what Ernest just said regarding wisdom and discernment based on our relationship with God in the past. But in this case, I also think, though, that Jacob always believed in the dreams and the prophecy that Joseph was given. So I do believe that it didn't take a lot for him to be convinced that this was the next step in God's plan. Because first off, they get the news that he's not dead. His sons confess, there has to be a forgiveness process with now hearing that all of these years that this was a lie. And so I feel immediately it's all coming together in his mind. Yes, this was the plan of the Lord. Yes, Joseph told us that he would see us bowing down. So it was easy to just say, let us continue with the plan that God has.
I love that. Okay, let us continue with the plan that God has. All righty. So I'm going to go on to, go ahead, Ernest.
Sorry, I'll jump back in just to add a little bit that I think it's even though he had made the decision to go forward, I think it's an amazing blessing that God gave him the reassurance, on the way, said, look, because there probably was some fear that, this big world power doesn't really like us shepherds and views us as second class. And, what am I supposed to do with that? But, God reassures him, don't worry about it.
Do you think like if God did not reassure him and was like, oh no, you need to go back, like would he not have gone to Joseph, or would he just kind of made excuses if God didn't approve of what he was doing?
I think he would have continued on the journey that he was. This is just speculation, but I think he would have continued on the
Speculation, we're
journey.
speculating.
But when you have fear about something, it makes you hesitant and it makes you not as all in, and you kind of half step. And there may have been some trips back to Canaan, halfway in, halfway out, and some other strange things. And God's telling them, "Don't worry, I got you." Not only did they send the private limousine, but all your financial needs will be taken care of too.
So true, so true. And so just to we see here in verses 2 and 3, here's what God said. He said, and God spoke to Israel in a vision at night and said, Jacob, Jacob, here I am, he replied. I am God, the God of your father, and do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you into a great nation there. I will go down to Egypt with you, and I will surely bring you back again, and Joseph's own hand will close your eyes. So when I listen to this, he's like, Joseph's hand will close your eyes, which indicates that he's going to pass away. But then what does he mean? I will surely bring you back again. Is he just talking about I'm going to bring your bones back? Or is it just going to be like I'm bringing your whole family? Or what do you think, Ernest? Or anyone else? What do you think that kind of meant?
That's a great question. I think it meant I'm going to bring your family back on the surface, but God's prophetic word has a way of being fulfilled multiple times. So, to your point, it could be I'll bring your family back. I will bring you back from the grave one day, and I'll restore all things.
That's good. I didn't think that far in advance. You're right. I will restore everyone else. Go ahead, Charmaine. What do you think?
So Egypt was not Canaan. So he was just reassuring him of the promise that they still will possess the land of Canaan despite going to Egypt.
Yeah, no, you're right. They still did eventually. What do you think, Janine?
I was just looking at the amplified version on that piece, and it says, I will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also surely bring you, your people, up again. So maybe he was referring to the promise that he had given to him from the beginning.
Okay, excellent. And that's good. A different version have like a different way of looking at it. What were some advantages of Israel being in, or Israel's family being in Egypt? Any advantages that you see with being there? I think you made some type of mention to that, Ernest, in one of your comments. Any advantages that afforded them by moving there?
Definitely the food. Definitely the food. Because remember, there was a famine in the land, so they had to go down there to get grain. And at some point, that grain that they hauled away was going to run out. So famines, and nowadays we call them recessions. Famines don't end quickly. It's not an overnight thing. So now they've got food and they've got a nice place to live.
All right, what do you think, Karen? What are some advantages? The food is good. For some reason, Ernest, I thought you were saying, oh, they make a really good chicken and dumplings. When you initially said that, but go ahead, Karen.
I'm sure there was some veggie chicken and dumplings going on as well. In addition to the good food, remember, they were also given the best part of the land, right? And they were given jobs. They were, because of who they were, their experience as shepherds, they were given lead jobs. And so life was not only good, life was great for them because now they were benefiting from their brother's success and leading out in Egypt.
Yeah, that's a good point. They had good jobs. They had food. They had the best of the land. Go ahead, Kevin. What are also some of the advantages that the Israel tribe had by moving to Egypt?
Well, I'm thinking along the lines of financial, that as you mentioned, okay, not only excuse me, are they getting an upgrade in their living situation, but this is going to have far-reaching implications for generations, because now they have a wealth base. You now have land, you now have flocks, you have position. This is going to impact their lives for generations. So that's what I'm thinking along those lines.
No, I like that. Their wealth. They've come up. They're not just shepherds. And the one thing I just want to point out, Ernest, that you said before is that in Egypt, they were able to be separate from the Egyptians, because the Egyptians didn't particularly, like you said, it was beneath them. They deployed shepherds. So nobody wants to intermingle. They're not going to give you your daughter to have, to have relations with. They're like, no, you're just beneath me. So the fact that they can still grow up as a distinct people in this particular land where they had more wealth and clout than they was in Canaan. Because as you can see, we're not going to go read it today, but if you look through when they list all the sons, one of this, I forget which son it was, but he had like this, his son was the son of a Canaanite woman. So when they were in Canaan, they were intermixing. But in Egypt, they were able to be this separate and distinct. Go ahead, Ernest.
One other thing occurs to me when you say that is when God called them away on this retreat to Egypt, it allowed them to kind of get out of their current situation. And every story we've read about them in Canaan was a train wreck. I mean, they were hacking up cities, sleeping with concubines, and just, I mean, it was all headed downhill. So I think God, in his infinite wisdom and foresight, got them away into a separate area in Egypt where they weren't necessarily influenced by the other Canaanite folks, and were able to kind of just come together as a family a bit more.
No, I like that. And you're right. They were a hot mess. Sometimes you got to get out of the place where you are more tempted to do things that were, to engage in idolatry. The other thing, too, that was brought up in Patriarchs and Prophets was that they weren't strong enough to actually take out the cities of Canaan. When, there were only 66 that came of Israel's family that came from Canaan to Egypt. So they weren't strong enough to actually kill the cities and drive them out. They had to increase. And so, like Kevin said, not only do they have this great land, they have jobs, they have food, now they can increase. And when it's time for them to leave, can drive out the people of Canaan. Well, majority of it. They didn't do everything. But anyway, that's another story. I'm just going to paraphrase the next chapter of 46, 28 to 31. Is basically that 66 people of Israel's family go to Goshen, and Joseph in his chariot meets his father and weeps with joy of being reunited. He then takes 5 of his brothers to bring before Pharaoh and instructs them on what to say when Pharaoh asks them their occupation. Why do you feel like Joseph needed to emphasize that they were shepherds? Because they were shepherds. Like, that's what they did. It was kind of like a parent when you're bringing your child into the store and you're like, listen, you're going to sit here, you're going to stand next to me, and you better not run away. It seemed, well, I'm sure he wasn't that strict, but I'm just saying, it just seems like he emphasized it more. Why do you think that was? Why do you feel like he needed to be like, this is what you need to say and don't deviate? Go ahead, Charmaine.
So they worship the animals. So for being a shepherd was considered horrible traditionally for the Egyptians. So that's why he had to make it clear. And that's also part of the reason why they were separated and placed into Goshen.
Yeah, you're right. And actually, which was helpful because like we said before, they were able to separate and be distinct. The good thing is that even they did everything right. They did exactly what Joseph had told them, and Pharaoh grants them the land in Goshen, and then in return asks them to take charge of his flock. The other thing I would say is that sometimes, Joseph was a prime minister. And so being a prime minister, it kind of affords you your, kind of, what is that, nepotism, where it affords your family to have other high positions. And so had they said, oh, well, we do this, we can do this, do something else, they may have been in a position that would have caused them to fall, to kind of mingle in with the Egyptian and maybe fall into that idolatry. Any other thoughts on that? Go ahead, Ernest.
Plus, and I think Karen said this in the chat also, that, it allows them to be placed in the right job. If you finally have somebody in a position, let's say a corporate job, and a position comes open that they can help to recommend you for, it is bad for the applicant and for the person in position to recommend the wrong person. So if Joseph had said, oh yeah, they could be a vice chairman with me, it would have took down the whole family. And I mean, we already know they have a history of enjoying lying and faking resumes and lying on immigration forms and all that kind of stuff. So Joseph had to sit down with them and say, look, we're not going to do that this time. Tell them you're shepherds. We got a place hooked up for you. We got a job, and all of it'll work out. So if they had lied and tried to fake their way to the top, it would have been discovered. If they all pretended to be doctors, it would have only took one patient visit, and the whole family would have been found out.
That's a good point. I didn't think about it. It also reflects badly on Joseph. Not everybody is blessed. Go ahead, Maurice.
And again, remember, Joseph was also in his gifting of administration. So he knew, like Ernest said, don't come up in here trying. We know your character. We know what you can do. Let's pull out our best assets and put our best foot forward. And also prevent what we do well. That's what we do well, and that's what we're known to do. And if we're in the whirlwind of the wheel well of what we do well, all those other things will come to us. So I need to get you over here, like someone said earlier, maybe Charmaine said earlier, they would have probably gotten into distracted like we often do. We get those jobs and we get caught up in the house and the picket fence and the da, and we sometimes deviate from our purpose and our goal. And I think that was part of, that was all tied into what he had to make sure that they were on task, providentially, knowing what the characters they were, to kind of make sure they were on task to where they need to go and where they need to be, as well as to develop this nation. There's only 70-something plus of them. So how are they going to be this nation and an example? They don't have a army and all this other stuff. So they'll, go over there and let's build over there and do what we do and do it so well, like I did. Not that he was promoting himself, but he was just using his wisdom and his administrative skill sets, his degree to facilitate what God needed for them to have.
I love it. Elder Hubbard?
Oh, I was just going to add to what Maurice just said. I think there's a lesson for us in church work. Let's stay in our gifts and let's graciously decline areas of responsibility that we know we're not good at. We know we're not coming back to AYS. So why do you want to be the AYS leader? You don't even get to Sabbath school. Don't be the Sabbath school superintendent. You don't even show up till about 1 o'clock to church. So stay in your zone, stay in your gift. And I think there are teaching moments in these lessons that we can extract from.
Oh no, I love it. That was a word right there. Stay in your gift. So I had to write that down. But you're absolutely right. Sometimes I think, and tell it on myself, is that you look at other people and you're like, oh, I wish I had that gift. I wish I could do it. I think I mentioned earlier when Sherelle was talking about her singing, and I was like, man, I wish I had that gift of singing. I wish I could be that person. But if somebody asked me to, lead out in the song service, it won't be a blessing. But but I agree with you. You gotta stay in your gift. Go ahead, Kevin. Mm-hmm.
It's funny when like you said, stay in your lane. But plus also knowing that these boys were, as you say, a hot mess. I mean, especially, Joseph is in the number 2 position. And they're like, ooh, goody. We get to pick from, and it's like, no, you will not make a mess up in here. I am telling you right now, this is what you will do. This is exactly what you will say. Do not deviate from this, or else we're going to have a problem.
And the funny thing is that God still blessed them, right? Because he's like, hey, not only are you in Goshen, but we're going to put you in charge over Pharaoh's flock. You know, like they were still blessed and put in positions of high power, but like you said, just in their lane. Do what you do best. Do what you do best. Well, let us move on to 47, verse 47, 7-9, and I'll read in your hearing. Then Joseph brought his father Jacob in and presented him before Pharaoh. And after Jacob blessed Pharaoh, Pharaoh asked him, how old are you? And Jacob said to the Pharaoh, the years of my pilgrimage are 130. My years have been few and difficult, and they do not equal the years of the pilgrimage of my fathers. Then Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out of his presence. I do find it interesting that he was 130 and felt like the years were few. I was telling somebody the other day that it just seems like time is going by fast. We're at the end of June. So it's like, there's a saying that says time is free, but it's priceless. You can own it, but you can't use it. No, sorry, you can't own it, but you can use it. You can't keep it, but you can spend it. And once you've lost it, you never get it back. And so with that being said, was there anything else that kind of stood out to you in this paragraph or in this verse about Jacob, about him actually just blessing Pharaoh, even though he was technically a whole nother deity, you know, anything that stood out to you? Go ahead, Maurice.
I think one of the things we think we can only bless God's people. Don't mind the birds in the back having a Sabbath with us. And oftentimes we don't realize that we, God's people, are often a blessing on the jobs that we have and these places of influence that we have, and everywhere we go. Again, we just often just feel that only time people who are blessing are God's people blessing other people. And even if Pharaoh isn't God's people, we can still pronounce a blessing on our neighbors and sisters who don't know God or who don't know of God, because God gives us that ability and the capacity, you know?
So true. So true. And I didn't think about it like, you know, we should be able to bless other people, even if they're not necessarily Christians. I like Karen's comment. Jacob took the time to bless Pharaoh, even though Pharaoh was blessed because of Joseph's gifting. Elder Halbert?
Also, God is teaching us a lesson here of reciprocation. Joseph was blessed by Pharaoh, so the father comes in and blesses the Pharaoh who blessed his son and therefore blessed his family. So as we get blessed, let's remember those who helped us get across the bridge, those who've been a blessing to us, no matter their status in life. It could be a poor person, a widow, or usher, but it's important to reciprocate the blessings that we have received from others.
I like that, be able to reciprocate. Now, are there any lessons that in this particular passage that show us how we should interact with like the government or with like people of power? I know we said we should continue to bless others, but was there anything that you took away, any nuggets? And while you're thinking, I'm just going to read what Linton said. He said, God bless others through us, God's people, and we are his hands and his feet. That is true. I mean, we can see in the story of Joseph how everyone was blessed by Joseph. But going back to my other question, was there any thoughts or anything that came to you on how we should be interacting with the government? I know I've heard of some Christians, you know, separating church and state and things of that nature, but is there anything that we can take away from that? Go ahead, Maurice.
Much like the church, people forget that we are the government too. And that's sad. As Christians, we don't realize that our godly influence can influence people, others who are the government like us. We just keep thinking these elected officials are governments. We are the government, we the people. And I strongly believe that, because even though we may not like the outcome sometimes, just going out there and praying, being an example, giving godly counsel, giving the word, all those things can alleviate some of the decisions that have been made recently, and decisions to come. So I think that's one of the key that I really rest upon these last days, that we the people, just like we the church, that word, we're called out, and we're called out not just to be the people of earthly government, but we're called to be people of God's government, and that's supposed to translate into our earthly government.
Thank you. Ernest?
It's interesting because, Jacob could have cursed Pharaoh for allowing his son to stay in prison and be a slave and other things, and rightfully so. But guess who God was using to feed you and your family at this moment? So, the land in which you live, you kind of want it to be blessed so you can receive from those blessings.
Gotcha. So I guess he had I'm sure he didn't have an ulterior motive, but it works both ways. If I bless you, you will bless me. Go ahead, Linton. Oh, you're still on mute.
Sorry to add to what Morris was saying. I strongly believe that, and everybody kind of may believe the same thing, that church and state should be separate. When it comes to the question of how we interact with the government, again, we do obey the laws of the land, but we obey to the point where it does not go against what God tells us to do. I think that's kind of important, that we have to realize that, there comes a point where we do obey the laws of the land, but once it conflicts or goes against what God says we should do, then we are not to obey man, but to obey God.
Okay. What do you think, Karen?
Yeah, just to add on the government conversation, I think that we should remember that God appoints us where we need to be. So we have the example of Joseph being appointed in that position so that he could have influence. Not only did he have influence to help his family, he had influence to help Egypt and influence to make changes without being changed by being in Egypt. We see the same example with Daniel. So it's not always that we should be separate, but I do think we need to be careful on who does the appointing. Is it God leading us into government so that we can be a change agent, or are we leading ourselves?
That's a good point. I like that. Why? What's the underlying reason there? Is it godly or is it a man? Okay. Well, speaking of government, I did want to go and read Genesis 47:13 through 26, if somebody can pull that up for us, because it talks about how Joseph navigated the famine. And so I wanted to get your opinion on this. So can somebody read for me Genesis 47:13 through 26?
I can go ahead and read it. There was no food, however, in the whole region because the famine was severe. Both Egypt and Canaan wasted away because of the famine. Joseph collected all the money that was to be found in Egypt and Canaan and payment for the grain they were buying, and he brought it to Pharaoh's palace. When the money of the people of Egypt and Canaan was gone, all Egypt came to Joseph and said, "Give us food. Why should we die before your eyes? Our money is all gone." "Then bring your livestock," said Joseph. "I will sell you food in exchange for your livestock, since your money is gone." So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and he gave them food in exchange for their horses, their sheep, and their goats, their cattle and donkeys. And he brought them through that year with food in exchange for all their livestock. When that year was over, they came to him the following year and said, "We cannot hide from our Lord the fact that since our money is gone and our livestock belongs to you, there is nothing left for our Lord except our bodies and our land. Why should we perish before your eyes, we and our land as well? Buy us and our land in exchange for food, and we with our land will be in bondage to Pharaoh. Give us seed so that we may live and not die, and that the land may not become desolate." So verse 20, so Joseph brought all the land in Egypt for Pharaoh. The Egyptians, one and all, sold their fields because the famine was too severe for them. The land became Pharaoh's, and Joseph reduced the people to servitude from one end of Egypt to the other. Because he did not buy the land of the priests, because they received a regular allotment from Pharaoh and food enough from the allotment Pharaoh gave them. That is why they did not sell their land. Joseph said to the people, now that I have bought you and your land today for Pharaoh, here is seed for you so you can plant the ground. And when the crop comes in, gives us a fifth of it to Pharaoh. The other fourth-fifths you may keep as seed for the fields and as food for yourselves and your households and your children. And you have saved our lives, they said. May we find favor in the eyes of our Lord. We will be bondage to Pharaoh. So Joseph established it as law concerning land in Egypt, still in force today, that a fifth of the produce belongs to Pharaoh. It was only the land of the priests that did not become Pharaoh's.
So the people were happy with the way Joseph had dealt with the famine. What are some lessons that we can learn about how he does this? Is there anything that you took away from kind of his wisdom? Go ahead, Ernest. Rowan, did you want to say something? Oh, okay. Go ahead, Ernest. I'm sorry.
No problem. Trying not to talk too much. So if Rowan's got something to say, that's great. But I love this part of the story because it's so interesting to me, and I'm sure there's so much that I'm missing and still have yet to read. But it's like the former slave has now become master. And to me, what it keeps shouting, and I pray that God help me live by this, is if you do not save for a rainy day, you will become a slave. You will be in bondage. And here Joseph had the wisdom and foresight from God to stock up because famines are coming, and save up for this time. And folks, famines still do happen every 7 to 10 years or so. We just call them recessions now. So the lesson to me is save for that rainy day, or else you too will be in bondage to Pharaoh.
True. That's what it said. Hashtag recession. Recession. Do you feel like, go ahead, Elder Hubbard.
This is very intriguing from this perspective. Joseph, the people were in need because of the famine, but Joseph didn't hand out any free food like we do at West End and different churches. This is interesting.
Yeah.
Typically, someone in need, you just give them some food without anything in exchange. But he made them pay a portion with their money. When the money ran out, he still didn't pay their light bill. He just said, what do you have in your hand? He took their cattle, right? Their livestock. And then he went a step further. He started taking the land or let them deed it over to him. Then he put them in servitude. But that's just intriguing to me, very intriguing. And I don't know what the answer is, but it's interesting how he dealt with those who are in critical need. He required something of them. So it's something for us to think about how we deal with those in need. Is there anything that they can do to help relieve their kids getting an education in the church school versus paying 100% for all the tuition? It's just intriguing a little bit in there for me. I got to think about
good question. The one question I had is it fair for him to take everything the people have? Like, did he take advantage of the people? That's one of the other questions. Go ahead, Maurice, because that's a question that I thought. I was like, they're happy, but your servants now. Mm-hmm.
I had to learn this lesson over years, and the only thing that's free is salvation. Everything is, and even salvation isn't free. Is at no cost to you, and that's our problem. We just keep thinking that we get stuff, this prince and princess mentality, that we get stuff just because we're so special. And it's at no cost to you. Doesn't mean that it wasn't a price paid behind the back end or paid ahead for you. Something can be paid forward for you or something was paid on the back end, but it's at no cost to you, but it's not free. There's nothing that's ever free. And I think that's one of the lessons we don't teach others when we're actually giving them services and giving them things, is to remind them that someone sacrificed, and not to say that they're not appreciative when they get these things, but we live in a culture now where it's like, it's mine, it's free, and it's, and we need to re-educate ourselves on that.
I agree with Maurice. I was thinking about that, the same thing my aunt was telling me and my mother one time when my mother was dealing with some issues and needed her big sister's help, and my aunt was explaining to her that nobody in this country or this world lives for free. She said, not even babies. Babies don't even live for free. Their mother and daddy pay for them. And if their mama and daddy don't pay for them, then we, the United States people, pay for them. But I think Maurice is 100% correct that we always think things are free, and they're not really free. You might not have paid money for it, but everything you see, particularly in a capitalist society, I don't necessarily know how you would apply it to the Egyptians, but everything you see in your house, on the streets, everywhere, everything has a dollar sign attached to it. Somebody paid something for it. The cheese you have in your refrigerator, you paid for that, and the money that you paid for that had to pay the person to stock it, had to pay the store to store it, had to pay the farmer to milk the cow. Everything has a dollar point on it, and we just don't think about it. Now, as Christians, we will help you and stuff of that nature, but even that Christian, they had to pay for it. They didn't just go out and pluck it out of the ground and it was free. And even if they did, somebody probably paid someone else to plant that tree that cheese came from.
So that's a really good point. And I guess, and I like what you said, Elder Hubbard, as far as, you know, when people are asking for assistance, how can we not just help them, but how can we help them realize that this is not free, this is not a handout. You need to, you know, barter for that. Go ahead, Angela. What were your thoughts? Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, I'm struggling. I need help because this seems very harsh to me. And so maybe I have several questions. Like, was the dream shared with everyone so that everyone could prepare? Or was this just, you know, the dream was only given to Pharaoh, and so only Pharaoh was able to stock up for it? Like, did the people of the land know that it was coming so they too could stock up for 7 years? So that they
go with they probably didn't know. Go with they didn't know.
So
the dream
they had inside trader information and they did not share it with anybody else. And so everybody else had to sell their land and sell their bodies and be in servitude because you had information and you didn't share it. And then you use that to take advantage of people. So somebody help me out, because maybe I'm looking from a very negative perspective.
They wouldn't have been able to do it. I think you're looking at it from a modern standpoint. It's kind of like I have a Costco membership, but I'm single. And some people look at me like, why would you have that? There are a few things I can get, but at the same point, if I knew a famine was coming, and what am I going to do with a gallon of mayonnaise? I'm like, it's still not going to last me that long. I'm going to have to build a bunker and all this other stuff. And the people couldn't do that. I think that's why God gave the dream to the Pharaoh. It's like if you had a dream, God gave you a dream, Angela, there's going to be 7 years of famine in the United States. You go tell all of us, we're going to be like, you crazy. You don't know what you're talking about. Now, if the United States government says that, we might still think they're crazy, but there isn't too much we can do about it. We're going to have to all go along with it. And I think that's what the issue was. Sometimes it's not necessarily the information. It's basically who gets the information and what do they have to do with it. If you look up now, even like Mormons are like this, and some other people are talking about the zombie apocalypse and everything. And you see on TV, people say, you need to store up this food and we can give you enough food that's going to last you for 5 years in a bunker. It's like, yeah, but I don't have a bunker. So now you're telling me I need to spend money to get a bunker. And then I need to put this bunker out in the hills and hope nobody finds me in my bunker and that I'm able to survive. It's not going to work. The right people who have the right capabilities need to have this information and spread it. And again, like taking advantage, I don't necessarily think they were taking advantage. It's again that nobody lives for free. If the government gives everything to you, they're going to have to come back and get it because now their coffers are empty. And I think that's what this scenario was. It's like, we've given you this food. We're going to have to replace it some kind of way so that the society can continue. Maybe there'll be an opportunity for you to get it back later or what have you, but we can't just 100% give it to you for free. And we do not have a way to replace it. Some people say that's why we're dealing with the recession now. I don't necessarily agree, but that is one of the arguments, that the government gave us too much money during the pandemic. So now there's so much money, it's not worth anything to society. Everything is shot up. And now they're coming back for it, the powers that be. And that's why everything has gone up in price.
Thank you so much, James. Let me let Ernest and Karen give their thoughts as well. Go ahead, Ernest.
Similarly, I'm telling y'all right now, a famine is coming. I don't know when, but a famine will happen if God does not end the world soon. But let's see who does anything about it. Very few of us actually will do anything about that. So similar to what James was just saying, the government had to do their part because a lot of the folks couldn't or wouldn't do anything about it in preparation. I don't see it as Joseph taking advantage. I see it more as, like if you tell somebody which grocery store has toilet paper, it's, hey, you can come over here to the government and get this. And I see it as Joseph really just telling the folks, what can you do? They're not necessarily standing there with their hand out saying, hey, I'm broke. It's the first thing they do is, oh, great. I know that Pharaoh's grocery store has grain. Let me buy it from Pharaoh. And then eventually it gets so bad that the money runs out and they come to the same grocery store and say, listen, I don't have any money. Maybe I can give you my cattle. Great. And I think that's a thing we do today. If times get hard, it's okay. I've got so much money. I don't have any money. Maybe I can do a job for you or do some work for you to pay for what I'm getting from you. And I think James already covered it that, if Pharaoh had just given away everything, then he would have ran out long before the 7 years were up.
Another thing, I'm sorry to interject. I know someone else is coming next, but if anyone has grown up in the country or knows anything about animals, if you don't have food, your animals don't have food. They're like, we're going to give you these cattle because they're going to die anyway. Do you think they had food to eat and their cattle didn't, or vice versa? So it's like, it was almost like a reciprocal trade. If you know anything about farming, especially before mechanization, you can't farm without animals. You need something to plow that field, something to help you haul it and such. And those animals still have to be fed. And if there's a famine, nothing is growing. So now what little food, the stuff you would have fed to your animals, now you feeding to your baby because there is nothing. And there's no need to even have these animals now because nothing's growing. So if the government does have the ability to grow it or whatever, or wants to be able to grow it later on, give them that cattle because they're going to need it later on just to even transport the food to you and keep them alive. It's kind of like what happened during the Great Depression. People were giving away their babies because they couldn't feed them. And no one talked about that, but that happened during the Great Depression. Orphan Annie and stuff, where it says her parents dropped her off and she never saw him again. They couldn't take care of her. They didn't have jobs. It was like, what's the best thing I can do for this baby? I'm going to give it to the orphanage, which was either ran by the church or the government, because if I keep this baby, it's going to die because I can't even feed myself. Sorry to interject. I just wanted to add that in.
All right. Just please raise your hand next time so we can go in order. Thank you. Go ahead, Karen.
I'll just say quickly, I love the question, and I think it is really good food for thought and an analogy in how we respond to the good news that God is coming back. So we can get a news that there's a famine coming. We have a time slot. We may or may not be prepared to do anything about it, but we also have been sharing the fact that God is coming back. And how are we responding to that news that this is coming as well? So I do think that it's a good analogy.
All right. Well, thank you all for your takes on this, because it is interesting. And I agree with you, Angela. I didn't think it was fair, but I get it. So I'm with you. We're going to move on because we have just a little bit of time. And just to paraphrase, so the next chapter, in chapter 48, it talks about how Jacob actually blesses his sons. It's been 17 years in the land of Egypt, and he's actually now about to close his eyes. And so he sees Joseph brings his son, Ephraim and Manasseh, to come to his, to be blessed. And what's interesting is that in that blessing, Jacob blesses Ephraim as if he is the eldest, where it was Manasseh. And when Joseph tried to change it, he's like, no, Manasseh is the oldest one. He was like, no, the younger one will be better or stronger. He'll be blessed, but the younger one will be better or stronger than the older one, which I thought was a big coincidence due to the fact that that's exactly kind of what happened with him and Esau. Next, Jacob blesses his sons. And some of the highlights is that Jacob actually brought out the fact of the wrongs they did. He told Reuben, you slept with my concubine. He told Levi and Simeon, you killed a whole village. The other thing that was interesting to me is that he actually prophesied that Jesus was going to come through the tribe of Judah. Which is interesting because he loved Joseph. I mean, well, clearly this was God inspired, because had it been Joseph inspired, he probably would have had, Jesus come through the line of Joseph. But then the other thing is, oh no, my question was there anything else that stood out to you with the blessings of God, those who may have read it beforehand in chapter 49? Was there any thoughts that came to you with that? I'll open that up to the group. Go ahead, Ernest. Mm-hmm.
All right, I'll jump in. Some of them don't sound like blessings, but just pronouncements of who they really are, their true character. Maybe it's a blessing to know that in advance. And the other thing that kind of stood out to me was with Simeon and Levi, the two that chopped up an entire city. It's been years, and in no part of this does he say, oh, by the way, thank you for defending your sister's honor. It's still just, this is a bad thing. This is all wrong. I'm not quite sure what to take from that, but there's no part of it that congratulates them for killing everybody in the name of their sister.
That's true. I don't think he thought it was a blessing. Yeah. Maybe he just, I think, it probably caused them more anxiety than anything, the fact that they did that. Go ahead, Maurice. Mm-hmm.
And just how he just calls them out of all their character flaws. It's like, man, your parent telling you, parents sometimes can call you out. And just when they call you out, it's like, what you gonna do? It's just is what it is. But even in the calling out, I'm telling you, it reminds me of how God spoke with Cain in this whole process. I keep seeing this repeated thing. It's like a counsel and an alert, like, dude, this is what you got. If you don't get it together, this is what you can become if you get it together. That kind of thing. That blessing, that's how I kind of see that whole thing. So sometimes when our families, our friends are holding our foot to the fire and calling out what they've seen in our behavior, they're letting us know that your behavior doesn't always define who you are. There's often a time to either reinforce that positive behavior or change that positive behavior or have an awareness about that behavior.
That's so true. And you're right. Maybe it was a blessing because then they see that, hey, this is not going to help you in the long run. This type of behavior. The other thing I thought was interesting is that if you read the chapter 49, some of the brothers only had like one sentence blessings. It was like, and you're a wolf and you'll do good. And that was it. But when you look at Joseph, he had like a whole 5 verses of blessing. So it's like Jacob is not like covering the fact that you are my favorite. And I didn't read this, but earlier in the chapter, he also says, I have a plot of land for you as well, more than your brothers. So definitely that favoritism is still going. Go ahead, Charmaine.
I don't necessarily see it as a favoritism because this was God inspired. It wasn't man inspired. And what I like about this is a part where Joseph received a double blessing, and it's in part for his afflictions and for the things that he endured in faith. And that speaks for our own journey and how God is going to redeem us through his blood and the things that we're feeling, our afflictions, our pain, and so forth. If we're able to bear them through his grace, he will return. He'll bless us the way he's blessing Joseph.
Okay. Thank you very much. In the end, I know it's getting close to time for us to end. I did want to just point on one other point here, and it's verses 15 through 18. And I'll read in your hearing. It says, when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, what if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him? So they sent a word to Joseph saying, your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins, the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now, please forgive the sins of the servants of your God, of your father. When the message came to him, Joseph wept. And his brothers came down and threw themselves down before him and said, "We are your slaves," they said. Now, Joseph saw Jacob before he died, and Jacob did not mention any of this to him. I'm thinking maybe they lied. Maybe they were feeling somewhat guilty. I mean, it had been 17 years that they've known that Jacob was alive. They lived here, but all of a sudden, Jacob dies, and they're like, "Oh, maybe he's gonna, retaliate." What are your thoughts on this? Like, I think that they were just up to their old habits of being malicious. Not malicious, but Go ahead, Janine. You know what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm.
They were guilty. They were guilt-ridden, and they were trying to come up with a strategy to save themselves in a way. And I think what they did was horrible. Even though the way the state of events worked out, I think when we do something that's wrong or against somebody else, our conscience bothers us. And I think this is all a part of their inner guilt, or what they probably would have done. As a man thinketh, so is he. So maybe that's what they would have done. So I think it was just their guilt.
And do you think, because so many times Joseph was like, "I forgive you." I mean, he wept. This man wept multiple times. Do you feel like they just didn't believe him? Like they thought it was just for show? Or is it just the guilt, Janine? What do you think?
I think it was serious guilt.
Serious guilt. Go ahead, Charmaine. What do you think?
To just add on to what Janine just said, it speaks to their nature and who they really are in the essence of them. Because Joseph told them repeatedly, "I have forgiven you. We're good. We're good." And in the end, they're just like, that can't be true. He cannot be that forgiving. I mean, we were horrible, horrible people. We did the worst to him. How can he possibly have forgiven us? So I think they still have things within themselves that still needs to be rectified.
You're so true. And the one question I wonder too is, am I like that? Where somebody's asking forgiveness, or God has, forgiven me for my sin. I keep bringing it up. I'm like, clearly he can't forgive me for this. Like, it's just not enough. Go ahead, Ernest.
Just to exactly what you said, I was going to bring up the same thing of like, this is such a picture of God's forgiveness, because, if I do something wrong, I'm like trying to patch it up, fix it up. Well, here's what I can do to make myself look better and all this kind of stuff. But Joseph is just saying, forget it. It's done. It's over. It's all taken care of. And he had means, motive, and opportunity to take them out if he wanted to. But his conscience is clear. He truly has let it go.
Yeah, that's so true. Go ahead, Linton.
Yeah, just add to the commentary. So I was wondering how their reaction was. Did they feel sorry, or were they repentant for what they did, or were they just, again, operating out of fear, which led to the reactions? And I think sometimes as people, we don't know how to forgive ourselves when we've done something wrong. So I just think that I just wonder if they had apologized to Joseph, or if that conversation ever happened, and then if they were able to forgive themselves for what they did. Given that Joseph, repeatedly forgave them and, pardoned what they had done to him.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I definitely, their actions show that they didn't forgive themselves for what they did. Like Janine said, that guilt is there. Elder Hubbard?
Yes, I think they were repentant, but they didn't know if they were pardoned. So in the time of the end, we'll be repentant of our sins, but we don't really know if Christ really cleanse every sin that we've committed. So in this case, Joseph represents Christ, and as Ernest said that he typifies Christ forgiving us, but we don't forgive ourselves. On the other hand, they were already tested by Joseph in the beginning with the cup, the silver cup, and different things. Joseph was convinced that they were repentant. But again, a love that can't be tested is a love that can't be trusted, but they did not know that they were completely by Joseph.
Yeah, I like that. They clearly didn't think that they were pardoned, even though they were forgiven. Go ahead, Maurice.
And just like the text that was posted in the chat, definitely what was said earlier, where they've been tested before, and this is a type of Christ. But I often bring it to something that I know of us. We have people who have a high EQ, emotional quotient, and Joseph had that.
to go what Joseph went through, you develop a high EQ. So kind of like how they sing this out, bless your heart. I guess in his heart, he was blessing their heart because he just saw his emotions connect to what they were trying to do and what their intention was, their intent, the spirit behind what it is they were trying to do. Whether it was a negative, but out of guilt, and they were doing it out of an emotion in a space. But for all he had done for them and how he retreated them and all that kind of stuff, he had hoped that would have still reconciled in their minds that, hey, I get it, but we're good now. But again, they weren't good now. And at least he realized that they were trying to go towards that road. And it spoke to his heart, to me.
No, you're absolutely right. Because the Bible said that he wept when he saw that. And when he said to them in verse 19, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children. And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. In this passage, it kind of shows or indicates that phrase that hindsight is always 2020, which basically means it's easier to analyze what happened and evaluate events after they've happened rather than when you're in the middle of it. We see how Joseph being sold into slavery, thrown into jail, was all part of God's plan to save the children of Israel and to save Egypt and Canaan, these people during the famine. But while he was going through it, it was a little bit difficult. If we look throughout this last quarter, Genesis, the book of Genesis, it highlights the obstacles of people and how they overcame it. What are some ways that we can take away that we've learned from this quarter on how to overcome these obstacles with going through it? Because right now, I mean, it's easy for me to look back in the past and see how God has brought me through. But if I'm going through something right now, how do I cope with it? How do I continue to get through the hard days? And then also, please share what are some lessons you got from this quarter's lesson, the quarter lesson. Linton, your hand's up.
Yeah, so I'll just share that. I mean, we're all going to go through difficult situations and tough times. So I guess the best thing to do is we have to trust God because He sees the beginning from the end, and we have to trust Him solely. We have to also lean on and hang on to His word and His promises. Those are the things that will help us get us through those difficult times. And then when we don't have that, when we're not connected with God, when we're not relying on His word, that's when we fall prey to the enemy's, schemes and stuff that he does to kind of get us off track. So that's my thought. My thought is we have to trust God because he knows the beginning from the end. He loves us and he wants what's best for us. And we need to know his word and hang on to his word so we can make it through those troubling times.
Yeah, I love that. Before Janine goes, Karen says, God orders our steps. So hold on to the promises and remember what he's done for you in the past. Go ahead, Janine.
Just to echo what both Karen and Linton said, I think my big takeaway from these 13 weeks is that God orchestrates everything. He's like the choir director telling us moving all parts. And we may not feel like it's him orchestrating things when we're in the middle of the mess, because I can only imagine what Joseph was thinking when his brothers sold him away and then he goes in Potiphar's house. So when we're in the middle of the storm, we're just like, God, have you forsaken us? So I think the big lesson in all of this is to know that God is truly the orchestrator of our lives and that we just need to trust him, trust the path, trust the journey. It's not really always about the destination. It's about the journey that we go through and how we grow from it.
I love that. It's about the journey. Go ahead, Charmaine.
So after reading and studying all of this and then application to my personal life, it's like when I'm going through something, I forget the stories. I'm like, my God, this is like really hard. But then I come back to my senses. I'm like, okay, God, just help me through this process, because sometimes how we view things and the source of the problem isn't always what we think it is. And it's just always coming back to God and say, I surrender, just clean me up and take me on the journey that you want me to go on for you.
Yes, I love it. I want to thank you all for joining me today as we reflect. Patricia, did you want to say something? I see your box had lit up. Did you want to say something real quick?
Oh, yes, real quick. Good morning.
All
Happy
right.
Sabbath, everyone.
Happy Sabbath.
To answer your question, I was just saying, like, when we go through struggle, I just want to say, I'm going through some stuff myself now. And I just, go in my prayer closet, and I just have to remember to meditate on God and his word, and just put on that armor of God. And that's how I just stay strong and and keep the faith in him.
So keeping a good prayer, going to your prayer closet, having a prayer life, which will help you stay strong. All right.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for your thoughts and comments. We're going to open up the chat. If you can put your prayer requests, or if you want to unmute and just share what your prayer requests are for today. Ernest?
Real quick, while we're doing you can submit your prayer requests in the chat. Just want to make sure, are there any announcements out there that we should share at this time? Go ahead, Karen.
Sure. Thank you, Ernest. So just giving everyone a heads up, if you need your new quarterly, we're moving on to this new quarterly lesson. They are doing a handout of the lessons for all grades today at church. So please make sure that you go on and get that. If you need a lesson, you can ping us in the chat and we'll get one for you. And also a new series at church starts today called Mind the Gap. It's a 2-week series with Pastor Carter. The chat link, or the link to the newsletter, I should say, is in the chat for more information on all that's going on. So please take a look at that and subscribe.
Awesome.
All righty.
Thank you.
So feel free to write your prayer request or unmute and let us know your prayer requests. We have Sabine that says, pray that I pass the test for my job. Any other prayer requests that we have today?
Yes, this is Patricia Davy again. Pray for my friend, she's like my sister. Her name is Mia. She went and got the booster shot, and she gotten sick really bad. So please keep my friend Mia in your prayers. Keep my family, the Schofield and the Davy family, in your prayers. And my car. Please pray that I get my car fixed. It's still new and it's overheating really bad. I can't go to church, so pray that I get it fixed. And pray for my foot. I'm having problems with my foot again, my left foot. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. All righty. Anyone else who has a prayer request? All righty. Let us bow our heads. All right. Okay, there we go. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so very much for bringing us to the end of this quarter, Lord, to almost close to the end of June. I ask, Lord, that you bless our Sabbath School class, Lord. Help us to continue to have a better relationship with you. Help us, Lord, to realize, to trust you, Lord, to have a relationship, to pray, Lord, to have that prayer relationship with you as well. You know the many different things that we're going through at this time that we may be spoken and unspoken, but I ask, Lord, that you just send down your Holy Spirit to just touch us and lead us through and give us the peace that passes all understanding. Lord, I ask that you be with Karen for her continued healing and to trust in you, Lord. Also, I ask that you be with Linton and his family, for him, Linton's family, and for him to finish school. Be with Mia as she is recovering from being sick with the booster shot. Also, Lord, be with the Schofield and Davy family and helping Patricia to get her car fixed. Also be with the family of Suave X and her friends with the job search and alignment, and with her fiance and her spiritual walk. Also, Lord, be with Patricia's foot that is causing her pain. Take away the pain, Lord. Touch it and just heal it, Lord. Also pray for Melody as she opens up her business and passes the state test. And pray for Velma, who was diagnosed with ALS this year. And pray for and be with Charmaine's family, and be with Elder Hubbard's family, and be with the family who with his stepbrother who passed away in California this week. Also be with Rowan's family. healing for her family and unity for her family, and helping they open the Canadian borders, regardless of the mandate, and give her a vision for her business. Also pray for Amar, Daniel, Dan, Kevin, Hank, Eddie, Santiago, John Anthony, Taka, Ken, Richard, and Russ. Lord, you know what they need. Also be with single women. Be with them, Lord. You know what their prayer requests are, and be with Sister Q's healing. Also, Lord, I ask that you be with my friend Ingrid and her father, who's in their family, who's in the hospital. Lord, help him to get healing. Also, Lord, I ask that you be with Sister Rosemary Thomas, who has been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Lord, I ask that you just help with her healing, and as she goes through treatment, just bless her and keep her. Lord, I ask that you be with all of us as we go and help us to come back safely on next week. And in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Well,
Amen. Thank you very much. Happy Sabbath, everybody. Go to church.
Great lesson. Great lesson
for you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Happy
Alicia,
Sabbath.
for that great lesson.
Yes.